welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We are going to be preserving cabbage today. I just pulled our cabbage about an hour ago, and I wanted to show you what I do to kind of pre-prep it before I head into the kitchen and really get into prepping it for preservation. So first off is just cleaning it up real good, getting all the dirt off and sometimes some slime that bugs leave behind. So I'm just going to spray it off real good. Next step is I have 2 buckets, and what we learned a couple years ago is that we don't like the texture of the outer cabbage leaves. A couple years ago I shredded, blanched, and dehydrated the whole cabbage, and those outer leaves were just really tough and they didn't rehydrate well, and we grow cabbage specifically for shredding and dehydrating. But I still don't want that to go to waste, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the leaves that are eaten by bugs or just starting to really yellow, or they just have too many bruising or deformities that I wouldn't want to eat it. And that's going to go into one bucket, and that's going to go either into our compost pile or to our chickens. And then the next bucket is I'm going to be putting the outer leaves that are still looking good, and we're still going to dehydrate them, but we're going to dehydrate those separately so that I know that they're outer leaves. And we're going to powder those, and that will then go into our greens blend, which we add to smoothies, but also just sprinkling it into various meals, which just adds some vegetables and some greens without really changing the taste much. It's a great way to work in some veggies. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate the 2 leaves real quick, and then what we'll be left with is the cabbage that will be preserved in the kitchen for dehydrating, shredding, and all that. Okay, that's it. We've got our bucket for powdering smoothies and super greens powder, and our bucket for the chickens or the compost. I'll probably split it between the 2 of them. And here's what we have left. Here is what we ended up with as far as what we're going to shred and dehydrate. We grow a early cabbage, which means they only produce heads that are around 3 to 4 pounds. These are probably only about 2 pounds each. I just didn't get them in the ground long enough, but I wanted to, or early enough, excuse me, in order to reach full maturity before it just got too hot. It got too hot too fast this year, but we have 2 growing seasons. I will be able to plant another round in August, and they'll be ready to harvest at the end of October, and that will give me hopefully double of what I have here, and we'll hopefully reach our goal of a year's supply of cabbage. But real quick before we head inside, I wanted to show you how to know when cabbage is ready to harvest. I mean, you can go by size, but a lot of cabbage varieties, you know, they're all different sizes, and this is really the trick to know. So as you picture the head still on the plant, got all these outer leaves sprayed around, when you go up to test the head, what you're doing is you just kind of squeeze it like that. And if it is very hard, it doesn't give at all, it's ready to be harvested. If you squeeze and the leaves crinkle in, then it still needs some growing time. So that is the trick to know when your cabbage is ready to harvest. Okay, we're about to head into the kitchen and get preserving. Okay, we're back in the kitchen. We have our cabbage and we are ready to get process it. So step one is to cut off the bottom of the cabbage and get rid of any slugs like that one. So let's get chopping. I'm just cutting off the stem and a little bit of that bottom part, leaving this. Okay, the rest are just the leaves. So step two, produce wash. This is 12% food grade hydrogen peroxide. This is my preferred way to wash all of our fruits and vegetables. It is 12%, and that means it can irritate your skin. So don't pour it in and don't pour it in until you're able to pour it into diluted water. And make sure that your hands are out of the way. You don't want this to get on your hands. I'm just going to do about a quarter cup to half a cup of that. I will often use vinegar as well. Vinegar is great too. Now that there's a decent amount of water in there, I feel fine to go ahead and just kind of swirl it around a little bit. I'm going to let it get just a little bit more full. I'm going to put just the leaves, the outer leaves that we're going to be powdering in first. Look at that little guy. Need to get him out. I decided to just cut that spot out. So as I'm putting them in the water, I'm also looking for any hidden buggies. I'm going to let this sit for 10 minutes and on to the next step. On to step 3, let's get those tougher outer cabbage leaves on the trays to get ready to be dehydrated. After they sat and soaked for 10 minutes, I brought them over to my counter, sat them on a towel, and just kind of let them air dried for about 30 minutes. You can see that they're not at all dry. That just means they might take longer to dehydrate than if they were bone dry. But that's not an issue for me. If you need to run your dehydrator for a separate project like the next day, then you would want to allow these to air dry completely so that it doesn't take too long to dehydrate. So just like with greens, you can overlap your cabbage leaves. It's fine for them to touch a little bit. With a lot of your fruits and vegetables, you don't want them to touch much at all because they'll just dry really unevenly, but greens are so thin that that's not typically an issue. That's true for things like cabbage leaves, kale, spinach, that sort of thing. It's okay for them to overlap a bit. Sometimes if I come across a leaf that has a whole lot of that white center stem, I'll go ahead and pull that off because that turns extremely hard in the dehydrator and it will powder. But sometimes I have a problem with it powdering. It just leaves in chunks and never gets super fine. So super tough middle stem I'll pull off sometimes. I'm gonna go get these loaded up into the dehydrator, and I will put the rest in a bowl in the fridge until I'm ready to run another load. Let's talk time and temperature on those cabbage leaves. I dehydrate almost everything at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a low enough temperature to allow me to go overnight without worrying about it burning, and it's not going to over dehydrate. There's no such thing as getting something too dry. There is such a thing as dehydrating at too high of a temperature and almost burning the food. So I always default to dehydrating at a lower temperature, and then I just don't have to worry about it. As far as time, cabbage leaves, those were still a little bit wet, so I fully expect it to take about 24 hours. But as with everything, you just go until it's done. The way to test doneness is you're going to take the cabbage leaf, like right now it's nice and flimsy, it's foldable. When you take it out of the dehydrator and you fold it, it's going to crunch, and a little bit is going to start disintegrating into your hand, and that's done. So 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and just go until it's done. I'm expecting about 24 hours. Okay, step 4, what we're really here for is processing all of that cabbage into shredded cabbage. So let's get going on that. Time to prep our cabbage, and in order to shred it, I find that it's easier to work with smaller chunks, and I'm going to be using this. This is like a manual rotary style chopper, shredder, slicer, that kind of thing. But whatever you're going to be using to shred, you want to cut your cabbage into that width. So for instance, this is my hopper right here, so I'm going to need the cabbage to be no wider than that. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I have a big heavy bottomed stock pot on low. Actually, I forgot to turn it on. I'm going to turn it on low now. And this is for blanching. We're going to have to blanch in a minute. So I wanted to put this on low, kind of low medium while I'm chopping. And then when I get close to being done with my chopping, I'm going to go ahead and put it on high heat so that it can come up to a boil. I love the beauty of fresh harvested cabbage. It's so pretty. Okay, I'm going to get some things cleared out of the way, get this set up with a bowl, and get shredding. We want all of our cabbage to be blanched at the same time. We don't want some cabbage sitting in warm water waiting for other cabbage to be ready. We want to, blanching is like flash boiling. You know, we only want to boil all the cabbage at once for approximately 3 minutes. So now that I am a lot closer, I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat up, and I'm going to get to shredding, but I'm not going to place it in the pot right now. I'm just going to put it in this bowl back here so that they can all go into the pot at the same time. I still have a whole lot of cabbage to do, so I think I'm going to switch to my big guns and get the food processor out. Everything is shredded, and I waited for my water to come to a boil. It's boiling, so now I'm just going to slowly add these into the pot here. I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit all of this in that pot. So I might have to double or divide it and do this a second time, but that's fine. I don't like picking up the bowl and pouring it into the water because that causes a splash up, which isn't good. So I just take it by the handfuls and slowly drop it in there to avoid any splashing, any backsplash. And we're not going to set our timer until all of it's in there and it's boiling again, which it probably won't stop boiling because I have it at very high heat. But I'll press that down and see how much room I have. Oh yeah, I think I'll be able to get it all. Okay, I think I can get the rest now without splashing. Yeah, perfect. I just want to try and get all of that cabbage underneath the water. I want that to cover it, be completely submerged. Okay, I'm going to watch it and see if we still have a boil, or at least a really hard simmer. Not quite yet. I'm going to give it just a minute and do some cleaning up while I wait. Boiling. So we're going to set the timer for 3 minutes with the lid on and get the rest of my supplies ready, which is we need like a big, I can empty this out and just use this, and I need some kind of like big slotted spoon so that you can very kind of quickly scoop it out and place it into a bowl and get it off the heat as quickly as possible, because we don't want to fully cook it at this point. We just want to blanch it, which is going to stop the enzyme process that is involved in the breakdown of food. Timer's going off, so I'm going to turn that off, remove it from the heat, turn the eye off, and we're going to immediately scoop it out. If you have strong arms and you can pour this into a strainer into your sink, then more power to you, but I cannot lift this heavy thing, especially with boiling water in it. I don't want to risk spilling it, so I use a big slotted spoon. It's just easier for me and it feels less risky than trying to move a big pot of boiling water, a very heavy pot of boiling water, to the sink. Look at that beautiful green color. That's another benefit of blanching. It helps the food retain its flavor. Now, I've been dehydrating for years and I don't blanch most things, even though it's recommended, mostly just for color. But cabbage and potatoes, I always blanch, because with potatoes, the blanching process is what allows them to not turn dark brown or black. And with cabbage, the blanching process helps it rehydrate a lot better. Without blanching, even after rehydrating, the cabbage remains chewy, and it's just not a very desirable texture. So I always blanch cabbage. Look at that beautiful green color, and when you dehydrate it, it's going to retain that green color. So let's talk about dehydrating. For years, I have dehydrated cabbage just in my regular Excalibur dehydrator. This is one jar from last year, only one jar left, so I'm glad that this is coming in at this time. Beautiful, vibrant green. And it rehydrates fantastic. I have access to a freeze dryer this year, and I would love to do a side-by-side comparison between dehydrated cabbage and freeze-dried cabbage. So I'm actually going to be freeze drying this cabbage, but all the steps that we've done to prep, to blanch, and all that, it's all the same whether you dehydrate or freeze dry. In a dehydrator, I dehydrate at 125 degrees, just like those cabbage leaves, and just like those cabbage leaves, it's just going until it's done. And let me show you an example of what it looks like and what it sounds like when it's done. As with most things, it's going to be crunchy, and you'll be able to crumble it into your hands, and that's done. You don't want it to be pliable at all. And if you go to squeeze it and it doesn't really crumble, but instead it feels a little bit sticky, just let it dehydrate a little bit longer. before you take it out. For freeze drying, if you are familiar with freeze drying, you just pretty much let the machine do its thing. There's no recommended times or anything like that. You're just going to plop it in, follow the steps, and the freeze dryer will let you know when it's done. So at this point, you can let this cool until it's cool enough to touch without hurting yourself, and then you can begin loading it onto your dehydrator trays and popping them in at 125 degrees Fahrenheit and going till it's done.